Welcome everybody to the middle of the season. As you
Woohoo!
can see, we have a very black tie affair as I sit here in my gray t-shirt and Brett sits here in his blue jacket and red polo. It's a very
So I'm dressed up buttons, and the
dressed
top
up
button is buttoned.
buttoned. The top button of the
Oh, that's terrible.
that is not good. Yeah, because there were no matches last week or this week, what else could you do other than mid-season awards? We have half the season to look at now. We can give some awards to it that who will see if they translate 3-4 months from now when we do end of season awards. But we have 13-14 different categories that we kind of went through, some that are like genuine awards that actually are given out, others that are just us being silly and we wanted to award some shenanigans that took place during the season.
There wasn't anything funny this season. It was serious
Esports.
high-level play by professional organizations. Anyway,
So we kind of have them organized in a handful of categories, and we'll just kind of go through in order. So first, we'll start with kind of the individual based awards, the ones that are standard for the most part. So MVP, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, and the Most Improved Player. These are like the first three awards that are actually given out. Most Improved, I guess, isn't, but it's like in professional sports, Comeback Player of the Year is an actual award. So we'll treat it off that. So I will start. We'll just go one at a time. So we'll start with MVP. For me, I couldn't root against Proper. I don't think there's a single player that has more impact in like every match he's played than Proper. And like if you took Proper off of the Shock, they wouldn't be undefeated, that's for sure.
yeah, I think that's an okay call, and I think that might be the correct answer. But I decided to take it from a little bit different of an approach. I was like, I feel like the MVP should be on the top team, and I knew you were going to say Proper, and so I decided to go with someone off the Glads, and I was trying to think who on the Glads was kind of the one that was the most consistent and the most solid player. And I think there were a few players that had really good pop off moments, but I think the most consistent for the Glads was probably Rainer.
You could make an argument that Kevster's been more of the linchpin for the team than Reiner has been, but I considered Reiner for MVP, but the reason that I didn't was because if you took Reiner off of the Glads, I think Space probably would be able to do somewhat of a job. It's like, I don't think Reiner is the best player on his team. I think Kevster is the best player on the Glads, whereas Proper is the best player on the second best team in the world.
I feel like DPS gets too much credit.
Well,
I think,
but in 5v5, it has to now. It's
not
like,
necessarily.
How many times has Proper single-handedly like basically won maps for the Shock?
Yeah, Proper has, but I don't think every team that's the case, and I don't know that that's necessarily true with the Glads. I think you take any single player off the Glads, the rest of the team is really solid.
Yeah, well, see, that's the
I
thing,
think that's
though. It's
true
like,
with Kevster even.
With MVP, it's like most valuable player to that team, where if that team didn't have that player, they wouldn't be as good as they were. And it's like if you took Proper off of the Shock, they're nowhere near where they were. Whereas if you took Reiner off of the Glads would still be a really good team. So it's kind of iffy, but I mean, moving to Rookie of the Year, I gave Reiner Rookie of the Year, so
I
it's
gave
like,
Proper
and you
Rookie of
gave
the Year.
Proper, so it's like we have them one and the same. I just felt like Proper is more of an MVP than Reiner is, and Reiner's like the Rookie of the Year because I mean he's definitely probably like the best tank in terms of consistency and play and flexibility that we have in the league. Like some other tanks kind of come close, but he's the best one they've got, and the best, top three in the league at least. Whereas Proper's like clear number one DPS. No one really comes close, and is as hyper flexible as he is, as consistently as he is. Because I feel like outside of maybe Kevster, there really aren't any other DPS players in the league that have consistently performed, because it's like Prophet sometimes doesn't do a whole lot. Fleta has fallen off the planet recently, but I mean, like Proper and Reiner, I feel like you could interchange them, and I didn't.
I think both of them are really consistent. Both of them are really mind-blowingly good at the game, and I think they're kind of the future of the league.
Yeah. I mean, because like when I was thinking of MVP candidates, it was like Proper, Reiner, Kevster. It was like basically the Glads roster and Proper.
Yeah.
So you know, those two can be interchanged. But then we moved to Coach of the Year, and I feel like there's like the correct answer, and I picked the correct answer, and you probably did too. And then there's like other answers. So I went with Christopher from the Spitfire.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really.
No, it's actually pronounced Christopher.
Christopher, correct.
Christopher.
With a capital F. It's like other people, like I've seen on Reddit and stuff, people would argue like, oh, Face should get Coach of the Year, but it's like to that argument, it's like it's not like Christopher came in and took a 1-win team and brought them into become a top 6 NA team in a turnaround season with basically the same players, whereas Face took a team that had already won the last stage playoffs in 2021 and then just made them better. It's like he took a good team and made them better, whereas Christopher took literally arguably one of the worst teams in the league last year and made them into a top table team.
Well, the big thing is coming into the season, everyone looked at the rosters. There were all these videos out there analyzing. There were 3 types of teams. There were teams we knew would do good because they had solid players and such. We had teams that we knew would do bad.
Mm-hmm.
One of those was Spitfire, and then there were teams that we didn't know a lot about. The Spitfire was a team that we knew the players well enough that we knew that they weren't going to be a top team. And then something changed. And I think, you know, the players didn't change, the organization didn't change, and I think good coaching is the only good explanation as to what kind of.
Well, and we've seen what's happened with not good coaching, and it's like, I mean, there's clear coaching diffs in this league.
Oh yeah,
and the Spitfire are on the better side of that.
Throw any shade, but Excel.
Hey, well, at least they just released Cookin, so you know.
Yeah, so
it's whatever.
But
it's like Christopher's the clear answer. So most improved. Let's just stay with the Spitfire. I put Hottie gets my shout out for most improved player.
Yeah, I think Hottie is really good. I love the Spitfire, and anything Spitfire is beautiful. But I actually went with something different. I went with what we at the beginning of the season saw as a weak link on a good team that ended up coming out and winning. You know, just being a really consistent strength for that team, and it was Patapan.
Really?
I think,
okay,
yeah. Because if you look at his early season play, you know, especially week 1, week 2, we had some big concerns about him being in the league. And then in the last, I think even in the last match, the finals, he was the one that got player of the game. And I think there were a lot of moments in, you know, both of the stage finals that he really popped off. And I think he has shown that, like, when it matters, he can play the game really well.
Yeah.
And so to see the improvement from like week 1 Patty to like
to midseason Patty.
Midseason Patty, it's like night and day.
When you because for me, I was I did my most improved based off of last year to this year. So I was like Hottie from last year. Hottie last year was atrocious, and Hottie this year is like the best, arguably the best Reinhardt in the league. But it's like if you're just looking for the perspective of just this season, then yeah, Patapon from week 1 to now is definitely the most improved. Because any other player that wasn't performing well is probably on a bad team, and well, those teams have not.
Well, and a lot of the teams, a lot of the players that aren't performing well, it's like they're old players that we've seen them. I mean, the players that started out playing pretty poorly this season, a lot of them are players that we know have the skill to do better. Like we've seen them in past seasons do well, and they just aren't performing up to what we think they should.
So I think Hottie and Patapon are good. It's like Hottie from last year, this year, and Patapon just from the beginning of this year to the middle of now. I don't think there's any other players that really are like either of them that fit into either category. So I'd say most improved based on just this season, Patapon, and then most improved from last year, definitely Hottie. But unfortunately, most improved isn't an award that's being given out, but those first 3 would, and I would say that Proper and Reiner probably will win one of those two. And if Christopher doesn't win Coach of the Year, then that means Spitfire did something tragic in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that they give Patty one of those, just because I've seen it seems like the casters and stuff.
I feel like
seems to put a lot on him.
The problem though is that Potapon sometimes gets out. He gets outshined by Kevster.
Yeah.
So Potapon
I
would have to
agree,
consistently outperform Kevster, whereas Reiner doesn't have to outperform anybody on his team. It's like the only he's competing against like Mikey and Kaluge, and Reiner is way more flexible than Kaluge and Mikey. So it's like Reiner is a better shot at Rookie of the Year because Proper is going to get MVP. And I think what it'll come down to is whether people feel like giving someone else Rookie of the Year. Yeah, that's what it's going to come down to. Because if people don't care, then Proper will just probably win both of them.
Yeah,
and I hope that isn't the case. I'd like to see someone else have two different people win those awards rather than just the same person. Well, enough of the serious topics. Let's get to the fun stuff. So the next category of awards we're going to get are the plays category. So, these awards are related to certain types of plays, certain types of moments that have happened. So the first one is Play of the Year. This doesn't mean it was like a super awesome play, but it's like the most memorable, the best play that we remember of the first half of the season. So would you like to start us off here?
Yeah. So my Play of the Year, I did some thinking, and the play that really stood out for me is something that I really remembered was just Lee Jae-gong booping like the entire enemy team. And I think the clip's going right now.
Yeah, I got it.
But yeah, on the Hunters Dragons game. And this was really early. Wasn't this like the first
this was early
week
on,
that they were playing games? I think it was their first week of play, maybe their second, but I think it was their first. And it was just a really good performance. And I feel like Lee Jae-gong, like, not always the most consistent, but seeing him like pop off on this map was so beautiful. And so I think this was just super memorable for me.
The good old 4K. That's his map, Lee Jae-gong Tower. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah.
I will never forget last season when he got like 7 environmental kills over the course. I think he holds the record for most environmental kills in a match, and it was on one map.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good one to have. Mine. You can call me biased on this one, but there's good reason. So I picked the Outlaws, Pelicans specifically, clutching the kickoff clash match against Toronto Defiant, because I don't think that this play, like, has just the perfect combination of being in a LAN environment, and I think that's what gives it the most like oomph and gets it overplays, is that it happened in the kickoff clash. So you had the audience reaction, and because it was in an elimination match, because like there have been a lot of aces in the league. So a lot of teams have gotten, a lot of players have gotten aces, but not a lot of players have gotten aces or effective aces in a super clutch elimination playoff match in front of a live audience, because, well, there's only been 2 events. And I think the live audience aspect of this is what makes it the most memorable, because I remember watching this happen and I was freaking out, and then you hear the audience freaking out, and it was an elimination match. And even though it wasn't map 5, so like, if the Outlaws hadn't had this happen, they still could have won map 5, but it was just so crazy to watch Pelican get nanoed and then take out the ulting soldier, the flanking Zarya, and then just literally everyone else that showed up. I don't think there's been another moment in any match this season that has had this much on the line and had someone show up in these final moments, and then you just add the crowd element to it, and I don't think it can be matched. I think it's pretty undisputed, and we have at least a summer showdown and hopefully end of season playoffs to get more moments like this. But it's like, yeah, there were like super clutch and awesome moments in the midseason madness, but there was no crowd. So like any kickoff clash clutch moment automatically trumps any midseason madness one because you have the audience factor.
Well, and seeing these clips with the crowd cheering and stuff, it just feels like what Overwatch League should feel like. It's like, this is the Overwatch League that got me hooked.
The Overwatch League we were promised, and then COVID said,
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Curse you,
Curse
COVID.
you, COVID. So I think those are two good plays. Mine, I was just at literally most memorable play that won't be forgotten, and yours was just a classic Ligia Gon doing Ligia Gon things. So now we move on to the best C9, best in quotation marks, obviously, because it's not good for the team that it happened, that had it happen. But for us viewers, there have been so many this season.
Yeah,
oh my
there
goodness.
were a lot to choose from. There were so many, in fact, that the Overwatch League the other day posted.
We're already halfway through. We're only halfway through, and they already have a C9 montage.
And it was a pretty solid length video. It was like a 5-minute video or something like that. Just, yeah.
So I will go first on this one. I don't think that there has been another C9 this season that has been as tragic. Like, it wasn't like one of those where you get super upset, like, why weren't you on? This was just tragic, just sad to watch. And it was Rain against the Houston Outlaws. This C9 was just I don't, it's like, it's just so tragic that it happened to the Rain. Like, overtime almost ran out like 4 or 5 times. Lastro gets nano boosted on Lucio.
And
Hawk goes into the pit, Venom goes in the pit, and then Nero just ults, and the Outlaws flip it, and they just win it. And the expression on Hawk's face when it happens, like, you can just see, the Hawk despair kind of thing. It's like,
it was so painful to watch, but also like so memorable and so funny.
I don't think there's been another C9 this season that has been as tragic. In terms of it was just unlucky. It wasn't like somebody stepped off. It was just a bunch of unfortunate events that happened. And once, Hawk fell into the pit because he punched Pelican over the pit, and then he just fell down. And then Nero thought he was gonna it was just a series of unfortunate events is what this C9 can be described as. And it lost them the match, and it's like Outlaws should not have won. Literally, Outlaws should not have won that. They were 100% losing that. So that was my pick for best C9, or I guess worst C9.
So the thing about C9s is C9 gives and C9 takes. And so I also did the Houston Outlaws.
But
and you might think, which one? Oh yeah, there were a lot to choose from. Outlaws had some bad ones. This one was Outlaws Glads on week 8, day 3 on Gibraltar, and it was tragic. And the thing that makes this one so painfully bad for me, this was the one that I watched that I was like, there is no way that he wasn't touching, because when the camera shows the cart after,
Dante's on it.
He's on cart, on the cart, and when they showed it from a different angle and stuff, it's like that. This was the match that made me think, oh, they've definitely changed the hitboxes or something. I swear they changed them. And this match is why, because he was so close to touching, Dante was. And I still think it's a touch. I still give it to the Outlaws. And I don't know that it would have made a huge difference. But I think it could have. And the big thing is this match was a 3-0. And I think this potentially was the momentum stopper. That this could have been.
And what's even funnier is that literally the map before, the Outlaws had an even more an actually egregious C9 on New Queen Street.
Yeah.
Had those two C9s not happened, the Outlaws could very well have been up 2-0 against the Glads in this match.
Yeah, and think about this. They were both 6-2 going into this.
Yeah.
Imagine where the season could have gone if the Outlaws had gotten the momentum of beating the Gladiators.
Yeah, I mean, the Outlaws would have finished top 4 seed for the midseason tournament because they would have had more points than the Dallas Fuel, which I don't know how much of a difference that would have made, but it would have helped the Outlaws out a little bit, because I mean, this was their only loss during the summer during midseason madness.
Yeah.
So it was like, had they won it, they would have gone 6-0, and it would have been them and the Shock would have been the 2-6-0 team. So it was just like, it's funny because that isn't the most egregious C9 from them in that match, but it was one of those where you're like, there's no way he didn't touch, right? Surely, what? So
and it looked like it, and the fight was going their way for the most part right there, and it was painful.
It was painful. It hurts. Yeah. So Outlaws give, Outlaws take. I think the Outlaws may have been involved in the most C9s this season, or at least close to it.
It definitely felt like it, and maybe it's because we were more hurt by them.
Yeah, maybe because I was more hurt, they were more memorable. But anyways, enough of the C9s. Next award is my favorite one. Was my favorite one to name because I was trying to figure. I didn't want to just name it like worst play or like no. This is the what were they cooking moment. The most egregious play that you saw in this first half of the season, where you saw it happen, and you're like, what? What was the thought process? What were they cooking? Would you like to take this one first?
Yeah. So mine was less a single play and more a map. And this map is what the heck, Mayhem? Why were you playing Hog?
Oh yes. Come on.
Yeah.
YouTube.
So it was also on Gibraltar, back to back.
Yeah.
But like. What was the thought process? It was so bad. It was so painful, and he wouldn't swap off. And it was pain. A lot of pain.
This was definitely the momentum killer for the Mayhem because they had just taken Eichenwald in like pretty good fashion.
Oh yeah, it was an awesome match.
And, like they had just beaten Reign with like the Rhine Rush comps, and then they come onto Gibraltar, and you just see someone roll out on Hog, and you're like, okay, I mean, I guess Hog might be...
before the match started, he was hovering other things.
And it's like, maybe if it was like Oasis, maybe King's Road, Dorado, maybe, but like the quintessential dive map and you pick Hog?
Yeah.
I don't know what Gumba what he was up to on this one, but it was, I remember watching that and being like, wait, why are we playing Hog? And then I think it was... after the match, I think it was Apply or McGravy was like, got it, never playing Hog again in a competitive environment. Was definitely
it was pretty egregious.
That's so good. Well, my what were they cooking moment comes from the definition of what were they cooking matches. The end of Titans Justice. When Titans take the lead and then proceed to go, you know what, let's take a fight on the Justice's side of the map. And instead of backing up and taking it, middle of the map, they kind of they use window and they just feed while the bot's moving. And you're like, okay, Titans kind of threw away a little bit of momentum, but they're coming up on overclock, maybe they could build up a pulse bomb or something. Once they get here, they can contest from the bridge, and you're waiting. You're like, all right, here comes the fight. And then they just
no fight.
And no fight. So no fight. They just don't touch. See, I was considering
were tired.
I was considering putting the end of this match as best C9, but I was like, no. Everything.
But it wasn't even a C9. They didn't even get close to touching.
Well, no, but like they chose not to touch. They could have touched.
It was so bad.
But it was because of the decision they had made just before that to take the fight where they took it. Like that window from Skyrippa was like, what? Huh? What are you doing, Skyrippa? You could have used it like on the bridge as they were coming around, or like taking the fight in the main hallway. That with long sight lines, that would have been great. But instead, they just do this, and as Mr. X says, the butt scratch does not activate there. It was
so bad.
That entire match was the definition of like the most egregious match I have ever witnessed, because it was just mistake after mistake from both teams, and I'm like, I didn't even know what I was watching. And moving into the next award, teams clutch up. We had like play of the year and stuff, but teams also do the opposite of clutch up, and they do the anti-clutch. And would you look at that? Oh, my moment is also from the Titans Justice match when Aspire on Circuit Royal kills 6 people. He kills 6 people and the Titans lose. Aspire was clutching up, but the rest of the Titans go, no thanks, we don't want to win, and
We're good.
they throw away the clutch. Like, Aspire literally kills the entire Justice team and then won, and the Titans still just don't do anything. Like, I don't know. If this isn't the definition of anti-clutch from a team, I don't know what is. When one of your players literally kills the entire enemy team, moreover, and you still just lose.
It's so painful.
And it's like, also, it's like even map 1 of this series on, New Queen Street, Justice give up like a 100-meter lead and can never like finish the match, even though they get like a bunch of sleep darts in the back from Vigilante. It's just like, So, this match kind of hurt to watch, but,
Yeah, a little bit pain.
A little bit of pain.
So, I thought what would be funny is if
what would be
the best
funny?
play and the worst play were the same player.
Oh, yes.
And so I went with Lee Jae-gon on King's Row, where he's a good player. He's wiped full teams before,
man.
and so he just ran it down mid, as they say in League.
What's so funny is, like, not only did he run after MN3 and get killed, but then Lip did the exact. It's like they lost the team fight that they had just won because 2 of their players decided to run forward. It's like Izuyaki gets caught, Boyd gets slept, and Lip's just running away.
So
like,
painful.
They were gonna win that map too. There was only 10 seconds left in the match, at like 20 seconds left in the match, and like that just led to Shanghai getting 3-0'd by the Fusion.
Yeah, it was good play, good. Lee Jae-gon,
I was considering using this one for the what were they cooking moment because it was just so funny to watch.
Yeah,
just Lee Jae-gon just running in and just dying.
Getting wrecked.
And then what happened as a result of that? They just lose the map. Not as direct result of that, but like as it just snowballed. They won the map. If they win the map, if they don't feed like that. It's just, it's so funny.
Terrible.
It's so funny. So that was the the plays bit, But enough about plays. It's time we move on to some memes, some mid-season memes. So we've got two awards to give out for the memes. The first one is best trash talk. So my best trash talk in general basically just comes from the London Spitfire social media manager. Because, oh my goodness, the one that I picked was after they got eliminated by the Florida Mayhem in the tournament. London Spitfire, they tweet pain. GG's Florida Mayhem. Good to see you start trash talking now that you've won. And Florida Mayhem goes, enjoy the flight home. And what does London respond with? You tell that to us, but not Adam? SMH. And Dante just responds with, Jesus, in all caps.
Yeah, I don't know who the Spitfire has running their Twitter, but I love that person. They are brilliant.
And I think so funny.
Yeah, I think just best trash talk award goes to Spitfire's Twitter, their social media manager. Because mine also came from them. It was just, I feel like you could just take any tweet from them and it's fire. The one that I happened to grab.
This tweet, I sent it to you when I was
I don't even know,
that wasn't
merited. I don't
merited.
think I necessarily even agree with it. Like, I think it's a little bit of a hot take, but so funny. Outlaws versus Defiant in the lower bracket. How are you going to put 2 teams that deserve to get O2'd out of the tournament against one another? SMH.
The London Spitfire social media. I mean, I was potentially thinking of giving it to like Unter, because anytime Unter did like post-match interviews, he always was just, or it's like, I don't remember who it was. Was it Unter or was it Reiner who like called APAC like the Mickey Mouse region?
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah.
So it's like, I was thinking of giving it to like some of the Glads players, but then I just remembered all of London Spitfire's tweets.
It's just so good.
Like early on in the season, the Shock had some good tweets where like when they beat Spitfire in Paris and their like updated map of Europe just dropped, and it was like the UK and Paris and London and France just didn't exist, but London in the second tournament cycle just
they've just been so on fire.
then the
They're
Outlaws, but then
spitting
the
fire.
Outlaws underneath it go, "Who are you?" And they post a picture of the standings and showing them above the Spitfire. Like, this season has probably been the best in terms of trash talk.
Well, and even like in game, you've had a lot of like trash talk
I just
in
love
all
the
chat, and it's
when
beautiful.
like when the Mayhem played against the Titans, they were like, "Titans, are you okay?" When Hydron was
No.
like, "Lock Widow or no win," and I just, oh my goodness. And when
It's been a good season.
and my favorite one though was when the Justice were playing the Shock, remember, in the kickoff clash, and they came rolling out on Control Center with Orisa, and Shock steamroll them, and the coach
Oh, yeah.
Krusty just types in chat, "What was that?"
That was actually, I was so tempted to
It
put
was
that as the "what were they
so-
cooking"
it
moment.
was
Because
So like this season has
But that was
definitely
so
had some
funny.
of the best trash talk in chat. And it's like during the midseason madness when they were just across the room from each other and just throwing birds
Oh,
at
yeah.
each other. Like,
So good.
It's just so good. But we move away from trash talk and now we go to the actual memes. So I have several for this. So I'll let you start with this because I have like some runner-ups and stuff. So
I've
what-
got 2 words for you:
uh-oh.
professional organization.
Oh no.
I just think the recurring theme of professional organization it's so stupid and so funny, and I think it's great, and I love it, and I love the addition to Overwatch lore, with the whole
And then it didn't. I
professional
think
organization.
was it Toronto Defiant then that came out with their own. It was like an organized group or something, like the step down.
Yeah,
from a
it was something
professional
different. It wasn't
organization.
quite. Yeah, and
It was like
I
the
just
step
think
down,
it's-
the step down from professional organization. It was like organized group or something.
yeah, and I think it's wonderful, and I love it, and
That's a good
I
one.
think Overwatch needs more professional organizations.
That's a really good one. So I've got a few. So my first one, I think it's not best single meme, but it's literally anything that comes out of Bad Patch Amari's Twitter. Because this guy, every match without fail is guaranteed to pump out a banger. Just guaranteed. Like, Bad Patch Amari is constantly pumping out the most quality of memes, especially in relation to the Philadelphia Fusion. But it's just, I love Bad Patch Amari's Twitter is just, I mean, he makes some quality content out of his, it's so good. But that's like, and in terms of the best memes that I've seen, it's come from Bad Patch Amari. But we've got some few others. Another one is Jake Despair. Have you seen the Jake Despair?
I've seen a little bit of Jake Despair.
Good old Jake Despair. So the reason that this one is so funny is because I watched the Avast Companion stream for matches, and it's like this one and the one that I'll mention next are just like two of the best emotes that he has, and it's so applicable. It's just so good. But this goes along with a recurring theme with several teams in the league who have like the strangest like match result and map result posts on social media, where they have like images that don't match the result. It's like it's like someone's like all angry, like happy or like roaring or something, and it's like they've lost. But speaking of which, the Washington Justice have exactly that. It's roar. Or mag, like having like a roar face, and it says map count down 0-1. And it's like we lost. They're just like, so many teams do this. Like the Outlaws, the Jake Despair, it's like when they were up, it was in color, and then when they lost the match, they just grayscaled it. And the Justice, basically any series, it's just the same still image of one of their players, whether it's like a positive still image or not. Win or lose, it's the same one.
It's the same one. That's terrible.
But my favorite meme actually this season is just the Washington Justice in general, and just how much they've turned literally the entire community against them, to the point where casters, Custa and Avast and myself, we just won't even pred them anymore. It's gotten to a point where we just go, no.
It's the Justice.
It's the Justice. Like the Justice
And they,
as an organization are the biggest meme. of 2022 right now.
And they're pretty consistent with how terrible they are.
It's like when they post, it's like, oh, congratulations, Titans, you tried. It's like, Justice, I don't think you have any right to be bragging over that.
Good job, Justice.
Good job, Justice. You want to?
Good job.
Yeah. What do you want? It's just there have been so many memes this season, but it's like, I do feel like all of this year's memes pale in comparison to last year's breadstick arc, because that is like that. The breadsticks of last year go down in the annals of Overwatch League history as the single greatest storyline over the course of an entire season. Like for all of the saddest reasons that they had to continuously drop the requirements for breadsticks because they couldn't get to them.
So tragic.
Like that goes up there with like season 1 stage 4 NYXL sandbagging. Like I just feel like this season it hasn't quite gotten to like longevity memes yet. We just aren't there.
No,
like professional organization is good, but I feel like lately it's just it's not really talked about as much. Whereas last year was like breadsticks from beginning to end, single greatest PR campaign I have ever seen from an organization.
It was pretty dang solid.
All right. Well, now enough messing around. We'll get to some. Well, now let's get back to some more serious stuff. So now I want to talk about which team do we think will have the biggest second half comeback in the season, and which team we think will flop the most in the second half of the season. So let's start with comeback. Which team do you think that currently is kind of not in the greatest spot, but will be able to make a comeback to push towards the Countdown Cup play-ins at the very least at the end of the season?
This was kind of a tricky thing for me to figure out, because it's like, out of the teams that, like, I think the teams that didn't make this tournament don't really stand a chance of making the next tournament. I think one possibility that I didn't go with is probably the Hunters.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I don't think they'll be able to crack the top four.
The Hunters could, in terms of Summer Showdown, since points reset.
Yeah, like but I think just skill-wise, I don't think that they crack the top four.
Okay.
That being said, I think one team that's looked really bad recently that I think could really turn it around is a team that looked really solid early in the season. I think the Fuel. I think they look terrible right now. I think they can turn it around.
Yeah, see, the problem with the Fuel, though, is they're 4th place in NA. So it's like there's not much to come back from in terms of like if you look at the record and standings.
I'm not saying standings themselves necessarily, but like performance-wise.
Okay, yeah.
Because you can't say they perform like the top 4 teams.
No, they don't. They definitely did not deserve that 4th seed.
But I think by the end of the season, they could. I think...
It's like definitely compared to last year, they've fallen off. But what worries me is I don't even see how the Fuel mount that comeback, because it's not like they're not fixing their problems. To me, their biggest problem is their DPS line is not up to par with the other top table DPS lines in the NA, and they're not doing anything to fix it. So they're really just relying on a meta shift for them to be able to play like their Moira comps and play Winston. But it's like if we go into Junker Queen, how the heck are Dallas Fuel going to compete?
I could see it.
Well, no, because you're gonna have to play Sojourn. Gurio has not been doing a whole. It's just I don't think the Fuel. I don't know if the Fuel they aren't making the changes necessary to mount any sort of comeback from where they are, and that's just kind of the unfortunate bit for them. It's like that's also why you can't pick the Hunters. It's like their biggest weakness is they just don't have the depth. Now the Hunters, I think, the Hunters are more likely than the Fuel, though, because if
who do you pick?
For me, I'm basing comeback just on relative performance in the first half of the season versus what it could be in the second half of the season, and my pick is actually the Guangzhou Charge because of who they just signed. Because now, instead of Choice 01 and Develop and who is it? The Doomfist player, Eileen. Now they have Choice 01, Aprita, and Jimmy, which is an upgrade. And then they dropped their other support, and they picked up, name change Yveltal. Xerneas. Is that what his name is? So it's like I think
Xerneas, yeah.
Charge have upgraded their roster, and they also dropped Rio, so they just have Krong, and Krong has actually been playing okay. So I think compared to where they were, Charge will make a comeback from where they were. Because I think that the Charge, with the talent they have, could overtake the Valiant, and I think that's all they need. I think they just need to get 6th place to be able to start into play-ins for the last.
Do you think they have any chance of making it past play-ins?
That's the thing. We'd have to see, because it's like it would depend on meta, because like could they beat the Chengdu Hunters? If the Chengdu Hunters are able to play Sojourn Genji like contenders are, well then I think they'll be okay, because Jinmu, lucky for them, Jinmu plays Genji. But it's like, it really depends on how good Jimmy is coming in. And Aprita, I mean, Aprita is a good player, and we were excited for him to be on the Hunters. So if Aprita is able to do what we expect him to do, and then the backline of Molly and Xerneas is able to perform well, and Krong's able to do his thing, I think the Charge could definitely at least jump into 6th, and it might be able to at least compete with Hunters. And I think that is a more likely comeback and makes more sense than Fuel, because Fuel aren't doing anything to change, whereas Charge have done roster overhauls and are making changes. My honorable mention for this, though, was the Boston Uprising. Because
I was going to...
Because Uprising are already a decent team, and their weakness was in DPS, and they signed Seeker, who I think is a Tracer. I think he's like a Tracer hit scan player. I'd have to double check on that.
Let me check.
Because like Valentine Victoria is in.
He looks like he's a Widow Ash McCree.
Yeah, okay. So he would play over Victoria then, and I would think he's probably an upgrade over Victoria, which is what they need, because they have a good team. Punk is a good tank, and then their backline of Crimzo, MCD, and Faith isn't like world class, but I definitely think it's good enough to compete with some teams. And realistically, all Boston needs to do is overtake like Justice, Defiant, Mayhem, and I think they can compete with them once Seeker is integrated into the team. In fact, Boston may be more likely to get into a good spot than Charge is, just because of how weird APAC is. Because like there's no way I'm even considering a Justice comeback. Please no. I don't want to see them in another tournament ever again. But it's like any team under Boston, it's like there's no hope for that. I mean, New York's not doing anything. They just fired their coach. No. Vancouver just dropped Shockwave, and they signed King. I'm like, okay, what the heck are you doing, Vancouver? Paris is doing jack all. So it's like the only team I could see that's not currently in the top standings that I think has a chance to get in there would be Boston. So it's kind of like a tie between Boston and Charge, I think. Boston being the more likely one to be able to make splashes, because I think they made changes, and the region as a whole has more open spots and more teams for them to compete against, whereas Charge, there's only 6 other teams for them to try and beat, and most of them are way better than they will ever be, so it's kind of unlucky.
But it is what it is.
But now, what about the flip side of things? A team that is doing well that will flop, or at least at the very least won't do as well as they did at the start of the season. So it's like a team anywhere basically that it basically made the tournament, except maybe like Defiant and Mayhem, because I don't think that they can really flop all that far, because there's no way they get worse. They're mid-table. So it's like basically top table teams in both regions who had a decent first half of the season at the very least. Who is your pick to flop a little bit, to drop down slightly?
Okay, I don't know that they'll drop all the way, but I think we're gonna. I think we're gonna see a drop from the Dragons.
Really?
Yeah, I think as the season's gone on, they've, they have good weeks,
Yeah.
But generally, I feel like they just aren't keeping up with the progress other teams are making, and I think that's going to be continuing to be a trend, and I think it'll keep being a trend as the season goes on. And I think part of it is just they aren't able to adjust to the 5v5 as well as the other teams.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I can definitely see the Dragons. I mean, the Dragons are third in standings in APAC. But it's like they won't drop, because I mean they can't drop very far. I think they could drop below Fusion, but there's like that's probably it. They drop a spot.
Yeah, but I think they will drop in performance.
Drop in performance, and they may not be able to perform in tournaments all too much.
Yeah.
and it depends on the meta. But I think, like you said, they're just not able. They haven't looked very confident in 6v6, and it's like the Fuel are the same way. And I considered picking the Fuel for flop because I definitely think that come end of season, the Fuel I don't think are going to be top 5 in standings. I think Outlaws will jump them, and Atlanta should jump them as well, and London might even jump them. I mean, Fuel may not even be top 6. They may have to do play-ins in the Countdown Cup to make end of season playoffs because their DPS line is not really cutting it right now, and I don't know how things are going to change. I mean, if we go into a Junker Queen meta, what the heck are Dallas doing? I don't. It's like, can Fearless maybe they can play, the Junker Queen. I don't know. So like my flop actually is going to be the Fuel now. I'm actually changing my answer. Not that
What was your answer going
I was
to be?
actually going to say the Outlaws a little bit because the Outlaws are 4th. But the thing is, it's like, I think the Outlaws might luck out if Junker Queen becomes meta.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they do okay in a Junker Queen meta, though.
And it's like, I was considering saying them just because it's like, if it's not a Junker Queen meta, it's going to be rough for them. But I think Junker Queen and Doomfist will be meta enough that they'll just play it. Because I'm genuinely convinced that they just may have Dante play Junker Queen. And Dante may just be a Junker Queen Doom player. And it was like, when I looked at the downsides for the Outlaws, I was like, no, actually, they probably would be okay and fine. Because at least the Outlaws have their niche comps that will work against mid-table and low teams. Whereas Dallas, I don't even know what their niche is that works against mid-table teams because it, doesn't work against mid-table teams. Like, yeah, it beat London, but London was also not playing their signature comps, which seems to be a theme for London.
Yeah.
But it's like, when I look at those mid-table teams, there's no team that screams, get ready for disappointment more than the Dallas Fuel. Because there's no way Shock and Glad drop off a cliff. Like, they're basically meta-proof. Atlanta Reign will find their way to win things, and the Outlaws will be able to niche their way through it. And, like, you could say London might drop a little bit if you go into a Junker Queen meta, but I feel like they might just ride Reinhardt until they can't anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like the Defiant and the Mayhem, they're not going to drop because they're not going to lose to the teams below them. They are mid-table, about as mid-table as it gets, and they're not going to lose to the teams below them. Whereas Fuel could genuinely lose to the other mid-table teams from 5th to 8th pretty easily, honestly.
Yeah, I think the Fuel could go either way. I think a lot of it depends on the meta as the season progresses, and not just this next split, but I mean
the split
this
after
next cycle, but the one after that as well, because like a lot can change in meta, and the Fuel have the right players for certain metas.
Like, careful with that one.
I don't think they're the most I think they're one of the more vulnerable to meta shift teams out there. Yeah,
they are definitely not meta proof just because their DPS line doesn't really allow for it, and their tank line, Fearless looks best on Winston and Hanbin looks best on Zarya Sigma, but it's like, we're not going into a Zarya Sigma meta. We're going into Junker Queen, like Reinhardt probably. And who's playing the Junker Queen? Fearless, Hanbin.
It's gonna be Junker Queen Orisa. That's going to be the meta.
Goodness, that would be something.
And we're going to see an Orisa, a Hottie Orisa.
Hottie Orisa. Oh, that means Mag can finally pull it out. Here we go. Oh, man. So, biggest flop. So, that's all right. So, enough of that. So, now we want to build some all-star rosters. Mid-season all-star teams based on, first half season form. So the way that we built these is each team, we kind of built them to be meta proof in some ways. So 3 DPS, 2 tanks, 3 supports, basically like the setup that the Glads have to help them have the rotation they need. So why don't you, who are your 3 DPS? What 3 DPS do you
3
put
DPS,
on your all-star team?
You might think that these aren't all the best choice, but
oh boy,
I think they are. So number 1, Proper, of course. Yeah. And then, just because I think Sojourn is kind of here to stay, and I think I wanted some Atlanta representation, I went with Kai.
Okay, that's respectable.
And then I wanted to go something a little different, because those two, I think, can fill, most holes that, you need filled.
Mm-hmm.
I went with Backbone
For just literally May.
for just the May, because
The
if you're running a rush comp, there's no DPS player I'd want more than Backbone. I
No,
think
that's fair.
Backbone's May wall placement and stuff like that is insane. And if you have Proper and Kai, you don't really need anyone else. I think
Okay.
the May is kind of worth having Backbone
Wow,
for.
that
So I think
that is
my
not something that I even considered, but I understand your reasoning, and I will.
Yeah.
I think that's good reasoning. So
Or your DPS.
my DPS is Proper. I feel like Proper has. If you have an all-star
Yeah.
team and Proper isn't in your DPS line, you're really doing something weird. So I have Proper, and then I was also thinking like the Sojourn, the hard hit scan. I went with Shy. Because Shy in the midseason tournament was dunking heads left, right, and center. So, like, Proper Shy, that's kind of nasty. And then to fill out the gap, and because, if for whatever reason, if hard hit scan isn't meta and you're wanting to run, like, Tracer Genji, Tracer Pharah, I went with Kevster as my third DPS because you could then run Kevster Proper, and like Proper can play Sojourn and stuff if you're like not needing a hard hit scan, and Kevster can still cover the Genji and the Tracer and stuff. So I think that 3-headed DPS of Proper, Shy, Kevster can cover most metas that you'd need, because it's like if hit scan is meta but it's not hard meta, then Proper can play the hit scan. But if it's like hard meta, then you run Proper Shy all the time, and it's like that seems really scary.
Yeah, I can see that.
So those were my 3 DPS, and I wanted to give Apex some representation in the DPS category.
That's one thing that, as a general rule, I was pretty bad at this whole coming up with things. Is I realized like I don't have a lot of APAC represented in my top players and stuff, and it's not because they aren't top players.
Well,
I feel like
North America is
it's
so
just
much
the teams.
better.
Yeah, North America is just so much more consistent. So if mine seems a little West favored,
yeah. All right. So what's your
what
tank line? Who's your two-headed tank?
line? I feel like you and I probably have the same, because I feel like it's the right answer. Probably. I mean, so Reiner, of course, and then I put Mikey as the second, because I feel like.
See, I can see the Mikey pick, but I also don't see the Mikey pick, because Mikey plays the same things Reiner does. So why would you ever pick, like, you would never play Mikey over Reiner. So like my tank line, I picked the tank line where you would play the other tank. So I did Reiner Kaluge, because Kaluge is an off tank player. So it's like if they're needing Diva, Sigma, Zarya, well then Kaluge is playing. But if it's main tanks, then Reiner's gonna play. Because if you do Reiner Mikey, when is Mikey ever gonna be playing?
Oh,
Reiner's ball's not bad though.
Yeah, you've got a point.
So it's like I went with a tank line where both tanks would see playtime dependent on metas, and it's like I was thinking of going with Space, but it's Space only play. We've only seen him play Sigma, whereas Kaluge has been inconsistently and can play Diva, can play Sigma, and can also play Winston if needed.
Yeah.
So I feel like playing Reiner, having a Reiner Kaluge tank line would give you a lot of flexibility in terms of who you want to play. And even if you played Kaluge in, you could still play Winston if you wanted to. Yeah. And it kind of gives you that flexibility.
Also, I totally meant to put Kaluge down.
I'd like to change my answer.
No, it's one of those things I was just rushing through, and I was like,
Mikey Reiner doesn't make any sense
at
all.
Yeah,
and I feel like you could make an argument for like Reiner Hawk if you wanted to, but I feel like Kaluge,
and I thought about doing Hawk, but I feel like Hawk just hasn't been quite as consistent.
And like Hawk's best hero is his Doomfist, but Reiner's Doomfist is probably arguably better than Hawk's.
I feel like honestly you don't even need Doomfist.
Just run Reiner Dante, easy. You have the Doomfist and then that's it. So all right, so close it up. Backline, who are your supports?
Okay, my 3, I felt like, first of all, since I was kind of thinking of Rush anyway, I was like, we need a solid Lucio player. I went with Funny Astro.
Of course.
Because who else would you go with? And then, since I was thinking of things that rhyme with Funny Astro, I went Lastro, because I feel like he's just really solid, And, yeah, and so I went with Lastro.
You went with Lastro.
I went with Lastro.
Okay. Okay.
And then I went with the ultraviolet.
Ultraviolet. Okay. My camera's doing funky things. I just fixed it. Sorry, video watchers. You just watched me go frozen and audio flicker for some dumb reason. Ignoring that. So you had Funny Astro, Lastro, and Ultraviolet. That's interesting that you went with Lastro. I can understand Ultraviolet, but the Lastro pick is it because
part of it
like the flex support, main support flexibility that Lastro's been showing?
Yeah, I wanted the flexibility. I also wanted some Outlaws representation because I felt like, it was one of the top teams I hadn't had, and I felt like he's just really solid. He's got some variety in it, and he kind of covers the holes that UV and Funny Astro might have.
Okay.
And I felt like it was pretty good.
Okay, so with me, I also went Funny Astro because it's like he's the best Lucio in the league by like a mile. But then for me, what I was going through, I was like, Ana Zen is primarily what you're wanting. And I was like, who's the best Zen player in the league? I don't think you can really say it's anyone but Shu.
Yeah.
So I went with Shu. And then as my other flex support, I went with Violet, actually. Because I feel like Violet, he can play Ana and Zen just like Ultraviolet. But Violet also has the Lucio pick as well.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's like Violet. I picked Violet similar to the reason why you picked Lastro, but like Lastro just plays Zen. He's like Zen Brig Lucio, whereas Violet is Zen Ana Lucio, and I think he can play Brig as well. So you would primarily run Shu Violet, and that's good luck jumping that back line. And then when Funny Astro's in, it's like you either running Shu Funny Astro or Violet Funny Astro, and you could basically interchange them, just kind of on like, are you going to play more Ana or are you going to play more Zen? So I mean, I was like really close to just going Gladiator's backline, but I was like, no, I got to put Violet in there.
I decided for a lot of these picks, it's like I don't know that it necessarily would be my.
Well,
I wanted to have some variety,
because
you don't want to just
pick,
go with
I can get behind the Ultraviolet pick because he is cracked out of his mind.
Yeah,
but
he's insane.
The Lastro pick I question over the Shu pick because I think if you're just going for like Zen players, Shu is definitely better than Lastro. And like I guess it's like you go with Lastro Ultraviolet to have the good Ana Zen with the Zen having the flex, whereas I went with Ana Zen having the Ana have the Lucio flex.
Yeah.
So like we kind of went with two separate ways, but then it's like the only difference that we really had is you went with Kai Backbone and you went with Backbone for Rush, and I went with Hard Hit Scan because I think Shy is the best hit scan in the world, and then I went with Kevster because I think if you're running Rush, you run Kevster proper because proper's May hasn't been. I mean, proper basically is just a god at every hero he touches, so.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like by having proper in playing May rather than Backbone, if you have to swap off of Rush, you can. Whereas if you have Backbone in there, good luck swapping off of Rush and having a successful map.
You don't need anything but Rush though. Rush works always. Like, if we've learned anything,
every time I think of Backbone, like having to swap off of May, I just think back to the super clip. It's like people are getting mad at my Genji, but it's Backbone, buddy. Like every time I think of Backbone on other heroes, I just think of that super clip towards the beginning of the season.
But his May is insane.
He is the best May in the league, but it's like I don't want to have all of my eggs in the May basket because it's like when you could.
Well, all of my eggs are in the proper Kai basket.
But it's
Backbone's just there for the ride.
It's like if we compared because our main rosters basically would be I would have proper Shy versus proper Kai versus proper Shy. Proper Shy probably wins that one just because Shy, his ceiling is crazy. Our tank lines would come out dead even, obviously. And then our back lines, it's like if Funny Astro's in, then the only difference is Shu versus Lastro, or it's like it would be those would be really good teams.
It would be a fun series to watch.
Fun series. Anyways, that's all of the organized awards that we had organized. Are there any that you want to just spitball out and on the moment, on the spot, throw out some awards?
The one award that I wanted to say that wasn't on there was the biggest tragedy, the Shakespearean tragedy of the season.
Tragedy.
I feel like this season started, and I was really hyped after like 1 or 2 weeks about two teams.
Okay.
I was super hyped, and
Okay.
coming into the season, I was kind of hyped about both of them as well. Um, One was uh obviously London,
Okay. Yeah, of
and
course.
that team, of course, is doing great. I love London;
The
they're amazing.
opposite of a Greek tragedy.
Yeah, and then you have the Mayhem, which are so tragic because after 1 or 2 weeks, I was
Oh.
so stoked for them. I was so excited, and they looked so solid.
Oh.
And then to watch them fall, it's been
Yeah,
tragic.
but like to say that they fell is like, they didn't go 2-0 in the tournament. Like Florida weren't even expected at the beginning of the season to be able to make a tournament.
Yeah, but after 1 or 2 weeks, it was like I had like mega hopium for them.
It's
And
like
then
that's a tough one because I would say Dallas. I mean, Dallas isn't my pick, but
I
like,
mean, but I didn't care about Dallas. Dallas is
it's
whatever.
like coming into the season, we didn't expect anything out of Florida and London, and it's like, yeah, Florida hasn't done as well as London, but Florida isn't bad. They're just they're a mid-table team with Toronto.
They're looking really bad right now, though.
They just beat London.
In tournament, it doesn't count. Tournaments don't count.
It's like I don't think that that's merited towards the Mayhem because it's like they weren't even supposed to do this. Supposed
No,
to.
I
It's
know
like,
they're doing well, all things considered.
it's like if
but they
I
are
were
doing...
if I were to look at one team and point at them and be like, what have you done from the beginning, like coming into the season to now? I'm looking at that 1-11 New York team and going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
in heaven's
that's true.
name is this New York Excelsior team doing? Like, because I can't look at Justice and say they're disappointing because they're just the Justice.
They're the Justice. It's what you expect.
It's built in.
Yeah.
It's locked in. And it's like Titans were destined to be disappointment. Paris were destined to be a disappointment. Boston are doing okay. Mayhem are doing okay. London's exceeding expectations. But then there's just New York, who I thought was going to be like competing with like Toronto and Washington. And what do? They signed 3 flex supports and fire their head coach halfway through the season. I'm like, New York, huh? How are you making Yaki? I mean, and it's like they had like some moments in the midseason tournament, like where they took Dallas and Houston to 5, but it required Gangnam Jin and Yaki to go Super Saiyan.
Yeah, which those two have moments where it's just they're insane.
But like the rest of the team
shouldn't
be this bad. It shouldn't be this bad because it's like I look at other teams around the league and it's like I look to APAC and it's like I guess you could say Dragons have been somewhat disappointing, but like that's a stretch maybe.
But they're just inconsistent.
Like
I feel like
you can't say Hunters are a disappointment because they just were unfortunate with their roster. Like Charge, we expected them to be hot garbage. Valiant, we expected them to not be good. It's like if you look recently though, you could say Dynasty have been a disappointment, but that was just one tournament. It's like the only team that I look at, I'm like, what are you doing? It's New York. Every week, I'm like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
What are you cooking, New York? What are you cooking? Yeah, that's enough of that. So mid-season tournament, we're halfway through the season. Things are interesting moving forward. Contenders is doing their own thing, and we'll talk about that next week. Contenders doing really their own thing, and new patches have come through. I have no idea what's going to happen next week. Straight up, if I have the faintest clue. So next week's episode is going to be interesting. So next week, I believe APAC is starting a week later, as usual, just because they have less teams. So next week will just be 13 North American matches or something like that. So next week we'll do
something like that.
What we usually do, we'll predict all of the North American matches, and then we'll talk about potential meta implications from what Contenders has been doing, from what patch is going to be played, from what we've been hearing and what we've been seeing, and why the community insists on calling every comp GOATs. And yeah, we'll go from there. And yeah, I've got nothing else. So
I think we're good.
I think with that, we will leave you all for another matchless week. Looking forward to next week's pandemonium. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.